Masculinity is an energy that comes, it's a strength, it's a courage, it's a power, it's a certain thing. It doesn't have to be a box that we put that you have to be like this, don't speak, don't talk, don't do anything, just suck it up and man up, right? It's hard, it's scary, it's nerve-wracking. You can get overwhelmed and dysregulated by kids screaming and sassiness and crying and being tired. The different parts of you that show up in different ways. So the responsible one, the one that is the provider, shows up when needed. But there's also a part of you that hasn't had the opportunity to show up in a while because you've either silenced it, or you've crushed it into submission, or you've never listened to it. Everyone has the ability to be a nurturer. It's about giving yourself access to letting that part of you speak up versus just being in that mindset of provider.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Manly Combos. I'm Corey Cummins, the founder. I'm really excited to have everyone back. If you've never listened to Manly Combos before, I'll just give you a quick introduction on what we are and what we're about. So our job is, or our goal is, we want to destigmatize men's mental health one conversation at a time. And we do this by having conversations with men who've gone to therapy, with mental health professionals, and we also have discussions with nonprofits and men's mental health groups. So today I'm really excited. We have Eli Weinstein on today. He's actually in Vegas and I'm in London, so we're quite far away from each other. But Eli actually came up with a great idea to talk about fatherhood and family dynamics. So Eli, would you mind giving a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm out in Vegas. I'm married with two kids, to a wonderful wife and a boy and a little boy and a big girl, and a almost year-old puppy. And I'm a therapist out in Vegas and in New York, and I do coaching throughout America and the world. And I really started this whole thing because of my own panic attacks when my daughter was born. Never had a panic attack before that point, and it really opened my eyes to the vulnerability of fatherhood that isn't talked about, and the emotions that are not touched on, and the focus that unfortunately isn't given to so many men in that realm and in that space. So that's what I'm here today, and I talk about my specialties, and I work with often is relationships and parenting are the two things that I really work on most days in my practice or what I do. So it's a passion of mine, a personal investment of my own hard work, and a journey that I think so many are on, that I'm on as well. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I don't have children, but this will be a great learning for me. So if I have children one day, I'm kind of potentially ready for it. So it's just kind of some good learning. So what are, I guess, how can fathers really foster strong bonds with their children?
So to me, the biggest thing that I think you see from statistics and research is the idea of just showing up, right? Being around. And a lot of people think that means it needs to be big things, huge opportunities, Christmas, holidays, Thanksgiving, birthdays. Those are very important. But showing up every day is the most important thing. And that's for small moments. Like my son just happened last night. My son last night said, Daddy, I put him to bed. And the funny thing is that all day he doesn't really want anything to do with me. He wants to hang out with my wife. But bedtime, he wants me. He fights with my daughter to do bedtime with me. And so I sit there and he asks for extra cuddles. Because usually we have a rhythm to the bedtime, right? And it's time to go into the crib. And he goes, no, Daddy, more snuggles. Now there's two options I can have. I can stick to my guns and say, no, Max, it's time to go to bed. Or I can show up and be with him for an extra 2 to 5, 10 minutes of just holding my son. That's a connection. That's building a bond. That's showing up in a small way that makes big ripple effects and impact. And there's a lot of research. If you look at certain books, and I can name them off, but for right now I won't, because I don't want to embarrass myself and forget any names, is the idea that 5 to 10 minutes with your kid, unadulterated, totally focused, totally present, makes a bigger impact on them than an hour of you not just being around. So 10 to 15 to 20 minutes of you just locking in on them builds connection. That's how you show up. And it's hard. It's scary. It's nerve-wracking. You can get overwhelmed and dysregulated by kids screaming and sassiness and crying and being tired. Those are all true and valid. But it doesn't mean you stop showing up, though. It doesn't mean you then hurt the kid by saying, screw you, you were annoying last night and up half the night, so I'm not going to spend time with you today. No, 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 no. They weren't doing it purposely. So don't hurt them for that. Show up for them, period. And that's the biggest challenge, is showing up when you're tired, when you're overwhelmed, when you're not feeling well, when you're in your own head, when you're busy. That's where the effort really makes the difference.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And also, I think it's showing up without a cell phone or anything digital around you as well, because
Oh,
I
it's
see
so
that all
hard
the
though.
time.
So
I can
hard.
only imagine.
Right? When you're running a business and doing things in life, and then, you know, you have this thing and that thing. So to me, what I like to do is I give myself a couple of minutes on the phone or a little bit of time, but when my kid says, "Daddy, can you play with me?" that phone is going down.
Hmm.
If my kid is playing by themselves, I don't need to force myself into the scenario. That's overdoing it. If my kid is learning to play with themselves, having imagination, living their own lives, being individuals, I don't need to impose myself on that situation. So I can chill, scroll, do what I want. It's not the best look because they think that you have a relationship with the phone, and sometimes they won't ask you because you're on your phone. So be careful of that balance. Um, but if that kid asks you to play, you better put that phone down and show up.
Yeah, I've noticed I have a lot of friends who have kids, and I've noticed the parents who don't allow phones in the house, not don't allow, but really limit it in the house for the kids and for themselves. You can just see the relationship with the kid, but also with how the kid behaves as well. There's just
Mm-hmm.
such a direct correlation to it. So you can see the strong impact that it has on the relationship with the kid, and also the way the kid perceives the world and reacts to things as well.
Just on that note, a great research book that just came out in the last 4 to 6 months is called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And that book
Hmm.
really dives in from the stages of development to the impact that technology has on a kid's brain and your brain and the relationship that you then have. So it is something to kind of be cognizant of and be aware of and see what fits your lifestyle. But it is something that you need to take into account because I'm not going to lie, my kids watch TV. I use my phone. A lot of times they're watching TV to save my brain and my wife's brain in the morning when they're up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I need to just like wake up. But we do limit it. We don't let them watch for 12 hours a day.
Hmm.
We go outside. We spend time out together on Sundays. We do things together as a family. So that stuff is super important. You have to find the right balance that works for your family. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing situation.
I read some of the stuff that he wrote, and I remember he said that your kids shouldn't have a phone until they're 14. They shouldn't be on social media until they're 16. So yeah, he said that they shouldn't be have a phone until 14, be on social media until they're 16. But the one thing that really resonated with me was that he said when you look at schools nowadays when we were young, we didn't have like a, what do you say? He goes, you didn't have a video camera, you didn't have all these things sitting on your desk. And
Nothing.
he's like, now you have everything on your desk. And so it is interesting how, we need to kind of go back to what it was to really kind of
Hmm.
get focus and attention, and to also
Yeah.
just give the time that we all need to pay
Hmm.
attention to each other.
Yeah. True. Very true.
And so what would you say are some of the ways fathers can support their partners, through the challenges of parenting?
So the biggest thing you could do is check in and show and really ask the right questions. So checking in means how are you doing? What do you need from me? How can I help you today? Right? And that leads by asking those questions, it leads to a bigger awareness of scenario in life. So if I keep asking my wife, "Hey, how you doing today? What's going on your schedule? What do you need from me today?" It gives her the opportunity to feel like the burden's not all on her. And number two, it gives me the opportunity to hear what she's thinking that she needs help with. And then I have the opportunity to show up. So those three things are really important because then if I don't ask, assumptions happen and disappointment happens. By me just asking and checking in the morning or the night before, what's your schedule looking like? What do you need from me tomorrow? And not just what do you need from me, what do you need for yourself? Do you need a break? Do you need to go to the gym? Do you want to watch Bachelor, Bachelorette? Do you want to take a bath? Do you need to go get your nails done? Do you want quiet time? Do you want to read? Do you want to play with this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to have a date night? Right? I don't know what's on your mind, but now I do because I asked. So that's really the biggest thing. And number two is this is a really hard one for a lot of people, is listening to constructive criticism about frustrations of life and parenting and the balance without feeling like it's an attack on you. Right? If someone says, I'm having a really hard time with parenting, I feel like I'm doing this and I'm doing the dishes and I'm doing the laundry, the first response is, but I do XYZ. What do you mean you do everything? I'm doing so much. So that pushes someone away and stops someone from sharing. A big, hard lesson and a very active skill, it's very difficult to a lot of people, myself included, is being able to sit with someone for someone's frustrations and go, oh, that seems really hard, and not use it as an opportunity to defend your honor or protect yourself. But in reality, say, oh, that's a lot. Or can I help out, take that off your shoulders? Or what can happen to make it easier? Or whatever support and love you can give, come with compassion and kindness, not defense and protection. You can always talk about your role and how much you're doing another time. And hopefully the other person gives you that kindness and compassion on the other side as well. But you don't have to do it right then and there, because then it undercuts their entire feelings. So those would be the two things I would say. Even though that was
No,
like
I'd
seven,
definitely.
but let's go with two.
They're all good. But no, I'd agree with that. But also think it's how both people deliver it. So as long as you're
Yes.
saying this is how I feel, not saying, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, because sometimes that can happen. So I think as long as you're like, hey, I'm just doing all this stuff and it's really tiring and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, I think that is something as well on, when you're having these types of conversations, you're tired, you're stressed, all these types of things. It's also trying to make sure that not only you listening, but how you're delivering it to someone as well is you're delivering it with compassion and kindness as well.
For sure. For sure. I love that. Yeah.
And obviously something that men struggle with today, even though they're not the sole providers anymore. It's very much 50-50 nowadays and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
men in society still sometimes struggle with that. It's been ingrained in them that they're supposed to be the provider and everything like that. How can men balance their roles as providers and nurturers in the family?
So just the pushback I have on that is, provider doesn't mean that you have to be a butt about everything, right? I can be
Mm,
a provider and still be supportive and kind. I
mm,
can be a provider and feel pressure and still love and care for someone. The
totally.
hardship is that when the providership and that burden crushes us, and then we don't have the space to be kind to someone else, or the space to be caring, or the space to be a nurturer, right? If all I feel is I need to make more money, I need to make more money. Oh my gosh, there's so much pressure. I got to pay the bills. Oh my goodness, and that's just the narrative. I'm not doing enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough, and you get tense and tense and tense. That's going to crush any person and make them edgy, angry, yelling, screaming, removed, isolated. That's going to do all of that, no matter who you are in life and no matter what role you are, whether you're a parent or not. That's a lot to handle. So it's about finding that balance of being able to be a provider, but compartmentalizing to be okay that this has to be put aside for a second. There's another part of me, right? And there's a beautiful thing that's really going around lately, that is this concept that was really pushed and created in the 80s, IFS, internal family systems, by Richard Schwartz. It basically, if you watched Inside Out, that's kind of the
Okay.
idea of it, that there's different parts of you that show up in different ways. So the responsible one, the one that is the provider, shows up when needed. But there's also a part of you that hasn't had the opportunity to show up in a while, because you've either silenced it, or you've crushed it into submission, or you've never listened to it, which is the nurturer. Everyone has the ability to be a nurturer. It's about giving yourself access to letting that part of you speak up, versus just being in that mindset of provider. And that's a lot of inner work of listening to what that voice sounds like, accepting what that means, letting the provider step aside for a second and accept that the provider's not on right now, and coming to terms with that and letting something else come through. It's a lot of hard work.
It's interesting. Obviously, I don't have a family, but it's something I've been talking to my therapist about around. I'm almost 40 years old, and I go, I'm do well, but I'm like, oh, I wanted to be here, and I wanted to have this, not
Mm-hmm.
like a business and all these things. And sometimes it starts to play on your mind. But I'm lucky because I have a therapist who can kind of help me work through that and make sure that it doesn't really bog me down. What is there any like tips you could give to someone that has really never spoken to a therapist or done anything, when if this is kind of going into their mind, what they could do?
So first of all, start talking to a therapist. That's number one, right? Because
But not
you
everyone
don't
might be
have to
ready
be
to jump into it.
right. You don't have to be crazy or insane to talk to someone and get a different
Hmm.
perspective that cares and wants you to be okay. That's all it
Hmm.
is. Um, and for me, the biggest thing is understanding where you are right now, and is it something that you feel connected to that makes you feel full? If not, why not? If yes, why are you fighting for more? What's that inner voice telling you that's going, do more, you're not enough, push harder, push harder, push harder? Where's that coming from? Why is that creeping up when you are killing it in this and doing that and doing this? What's not enough for you? Right. And it's just about asking those very real, just straight up questions about your system. But the hardest part for a lot of people is they hear that and they don't listen to it. Right. The hard part is becoming aware of what your system is telling you. And that takes a lot of just silence and calm and sitting with it, journaling, thinking about it, talking about it, reading about it. It's all this effort to understand yourself, to then make efforts to then either change or accept or love or make pivots in your life. But the first thing has to come awareness and understanding of who you are and what's going on and why. Why is it going this way? And it means that something I always tell my clients is that you can ask all the hard questions and still end up in the same place, but now you know why you're doing it. You don't have to change. Everything could be great, but now you understand why this system comes in here and why this thought comes in there, and everything could still be really good. Nothing has to be wrong with you. It's just giving you a better foundation of knowing who you are to then move forward. People are very
And
afraid of therapy because it thinks like you're gonna have to change your entire life. Like, no, sometimes you're doing a great job. But all I'm here is to figure out why you're freaking out about it or why you're getting stressed about it. And then you can still keep doing it if it works for you and you're happy and fulfilled. Doesn't mean you have to now change your life and drop everything you're doing just because you're going to therapy.
what do you think a partner? So say, this is, I just asked you what a guy could do or a man could do to try to work on this. Say you're married and you're the partner to this person. What can that partner do when if they're seeing their loved one really struggle? Seeing their loved one who's a man struggle with this. Is there anything they can do to kind of help support them in this?
For sure. The first thing is checking in with them and asking if they're okay. That's number one. That usually doesn't work because a lot of people don't want to share. They're afraid of judgment. They're afraid and worried that something's going to come out and they're not going to like it, or the other person's not going to like them as much anymore, and all those kind of natural tendencies of pushback that you're going to have. Right? You'd be like, I don't want to share this with you because it could be the detriment of our relationship, or you might not love me anymore the same way. So it's about asking how the person's doing and saying you have their back, creating a safe space for them, and then let them be. Don't nag and push. That makes someone clam up and become a turtle and hide. Show you care, show you love, show that you're there, and that when they need you, you will show up. But then step back and give them the space to meet you there. Right? There's a line I use often with clients is like, you can have all the wants and needs in the world, but you can't demand that from someone else to show up the way you need to. You can't demand someone to meet you where you're at. You have to wait for them to get to where they're at comfortably enough to meet you close enough to where you want them to be. And that takes just patience and kindness and just, I got your back, I'm here if you need. And really mean it. And show them love when you mean it. And when they do share, show up the way they need, not the way you think they need. So that means asking questions. What do you need from this conversation? How do you need me to show up today? Do you need love? Do you need attention? Do you need a vent? Do you need advice? Because if they share and you attack or jump or defend or cut them down, they're not coming back to you for a long time. You got to give that space that's kind and loving and real and honest, that you don't scare them off, because it is a hard thing for men to do.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I like the questions that you said. Do you want love or advice or just a
You got
vent
us
or
at the
whatever
right
it
table,
is?
bro. You got us at the right table. You can't just jump into a conversation and expect that you know what someone needs. I don't care how long you've been married to someone or with someone. You don't know what they need right here, right now, today, in that moment. It's a very different experience.
I agree. I even think that question should, it's something that I've been trying to do. I don't do it that well, but when a friend comes to you for advice or wants to say something, is responding with that. Because same thing. This is with everybody, friends, with coworkers, whatever it is. Sometimes people don't want to hear your opinion. They just want to say what they want to say and be done with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
good
For sure.
question to ask. So something that I'm sure you've experienced and I've experienced. I have some friends who have unfortunately gotten divorced, and they might not be. They
Mhm.
might be a father, might not be a father. I guess, are there some unique challenges that single fathers or diverse fathers face?
What do you mean?
So, say you're divorced and your father. Is there anything that you see that there's any
Mhm.
challenges they face as a
Yeah, I think there's like a feeling of less than maybe sometimes. I haven't really worked with a lot of divorced men, but just to make a jump of what I have worked with and just the feelings of men in general, there is a sense of failure that comes with that, even though the divorce could be totally needed, warranted, a must. And then there's also a feeling of judgment maybe from the kids, right? What did you do wrong? Right? And this idea of sharing and then sharing your family with someone else is a very hard thing to swallow. So it does take time and it does take acceptance that was this done for the right reason? Am I how can I give myself the grace to to accept the reality that is versus fighting a reality that is, because that's usually what
Hmm.
happens. Like someone's like, this is not real and this is not true and blah, 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 and they start fighting a reality that's right there in their face. So that to me would be the biggest struggle, is accepting that reality and how it shows.
That makes complete sense. I can't imagine how hard it would be to have to share your family with someone else, and then it's like you're trying to parent them in one way, and then who knows how it is when you're not there. That's got to be really difficult to do.
That's why co-parenting is so important, right? It's a
Yeah,
skill.
yeah, yeah. I couldn't even imagine how difficult that must be. And something that I've always wondered, because I don't have kids, but I'm very big into mental health and obviously how what is masculinity as a man.
Hmm.
How can fathers encourage their sons to develop a healthy sense of masculinity and also be open with things like mental health?
To me, it's all how you define masculinity, right? So if we're going to define masculinity as being something that is, they're full of self and all the different parts of them, um, it's just about having them show up, in their fullest way as a kid, right? That all of them is accepted, all of them is good, all of them is, there's no bad part of them, all of them is valuable. There are parts of them maybe not as enjoyable, maybe not as that need to happen right here, right now. Or maybe anger is not the best part here today, but anger is not a bad thing, right? It shows passion, it shows intensity, it shows emotion. So that'd be the first thing, is that accepting your kid fully. Number two is don't push your own things on your kids. I don't care if you played football, basketball. I don't care if you were in this high school and that college. You got to embrace the kid who they are today, who they want to be today, because that means that you love and accept them as them. They don't need to hide. They don't need to have a mask. They don't need to pretend. They are their fullest self with you. That is what a true person is. It's not about a man or a woman. Masculinity is an energy that comes. It's a strength. It's a courage. It's a power. It's a certain thing. It doesn't have to be a box that we put that you have to be like this. Don't speak, don't talk, don't do anything. Just suck it up and man up, right?
Hmm.
You can show up in a very emotional way and be extremely masculine. You can show up in a very stoic way and be very feminine. Doesn't there's not It's two different things. So as long as you give that kid the space to find who they are, and you then go with them through that process and be okay with that, and love them for that, that's the biggest thing you can give for a kid. Because they're not weird, they're not crazy, they're not off, they're not nuts, they're not bad, they're not good, they just are. And they can feel that love and feel that connection, that you care about them today for who they are today. Whether they're being wacky, whether they're being upset, whether they're being silly, whether they're dancing, whether they're doing. I mean, like I'm watching not right now because I'm talking to you, but like the Olympics are on, right? And everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to put my kid in gymnastics and I'm going to put my kid in this." That's awesome. And if my kid likes it, great. My daughter happens to be in gymnastics. She loves it. My son doesn't need to be in gymnastics just because my daughter likes it. My son could be in, I don't know, whatever he wants to be. So it's about embracing that kid today and what they want. It doesn't mean you have to give in though. That's a totally different thing about parenting. It doesn't mean you have to say yes to everything. But it means that you love them for the choices, you love them for the decisions, you love them for how they're showing up today. That's the biggest thing you can do for the boys.
And how do you
We do it a
balance
lot easier
the?
with girls, by the way. We do it a lot quicker with girls. Oh, you're being so wonderful. You're doing amazing. You can do whatever you want. And for boys, like, no. Don't do that. That's weird. It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening. I guess how with this, so obviously you want to, as a parent, you want to let your kid be who they are and feel how they feel, and try not to be like the generations before us where we push down emotions and push down the
Mm-hmm.
way they feel. But how do you balance, obviously, them realizing what's right and what's wrong, and not acting, doing these wrong things, but also allowing them to feel and be open about their feelings and stuff like that?
I love that question, Corey. Thank you for asking that. You create the structure, you create the boundaries that they live in, but
Hmm.
you let them live within that boundary as free as they want, right? But there are things that we don't do as a family, right? Whether it's religious, political, whether it's values or beliefs that you have as a family that you and your partner have discussed are the values of your family.
Hmm.
And if you don't let your kids cross that value, but it doesn't mean you can't, there's a lot of space between the yes and the no. There's the gray.
Hmm.
So you got to decide what that gray looks like between you and your partner to let your kids run freely and enjoy life. But it doesn't mean I'm going to allow you to hit me. Oh, he's being, he's just expressing himself. No, we don't hit each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, right? We create the boundaries. You're allowed to say no. There's a very big difference between being a permissive parent and being a parent with structure. And we're not talking about a parent that's being aggressive structure where the space is thin, where
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
no to most things and a yes to one thing. You can only wear this. You can only wear one. You can only eat this, right? We're saying have a little more grace and a little more space within that, and give gray area within family values, right? So I'm a religious Orthodox Jew. We keep Sabbath. We don't use electronics on Saturday. My kids wake up on Saturday and say, "Can we watch TV?" And the answer is no, it's Sabbath. And they understand that now. They know what that means. So when they wake up on Saturday and we're going to go to synagogue or do what we do with family, they don't ask anymore. My son, who's 2.5, does because he's 2.5 years old and he's a baby. But when we go, oh, it's Sabbath, he goes, oh, okay. It doesn't mean that we don't let them have fun, but we have guidelines in our life. We don't speak a certain way. We don't eat certain foods. I promise you, they eat damn well. They eat really well. We don't eat pork. Okay. We don't eat certain seafood. Okay. But we eat, we cook and we eat plenty of food. There's a structure to it. Kids need structure. Without structure, the chaos crushes them and kills their brain. So it's okay to say yes and it's okay to say no within values, and you better have values as a family. You better have belief system as a family. It's not a free for all. That doesn't do any good for any kid and for the parents. So before you're having kids, think about what your values are and beliefs as a family, as a unit, as how you want your kids to be raised, and then build the structure around them where they have space to live in it, but there is a fence where they can't cross. There is a force field that just they're not going to go over that line until they're adult and maybe they make their own decisions and change their lifestyle. That's up to them then. But until that point, and it doesn't mean you're being aggressive, mean, or you're being nasty or hurtful. You're giving them a beautiful life with structure. It's amazing.
No, I completely agree with that. I have a lot of friends who have kids, so it's interesting to see, and you can tell some of them struggle with that balance between they don't want their kids to hate them at times, and they want to be their best friends, but unfortunately, not every day and every hour is your kid going to love you for for who you are and what you do.
Yeah.
It's just it's kind of
If
life,
that, by the way,
unfortunately.
not to be too sassy, but my brand is no BS with lots of compassion. Is if your goal is to be the best for your best friend with your kid, you're going to fail.
Hmm.
Not as a parent, you're just going to fail because there are days where I give my kids so much love. And the one time that I say it's bedtime now, and my daughter says, I hate you, you're the worst father ever, I feel like I have lost everything that I hold dear and value.
Hmm.
But if my backdrop to my parenting is I'm the adult, it's bedtime, I love you and care about you, and I want to have a relationship with you, not best friends. I want to have a relationship with you. And that means good, bad, and ugly. All the ups and downs, this is just part of the relationship. If my goal is best friends, I'm going to placate to every need, every tantrum, every cry, everything is going to be, of course, whatever you want. that leads to permissiveness, that leads to kids who are spoiled, that leads to kids who don't have control over their emotions and no boundaries of life because everything is given to them because all the parent cares about is, I just want them to like me. Your
Mm.
kids love you. They do. I promise you, for the most part, most parents aren't doing anything that bad for their kids to hate them. They just said no to a lollipop that morning. That's all it is. No one's like, for the most part, no one's really beating their kids and hurting their kids. There are, of course, people who do that, and that's a different scenario. For the most part, you're giving your kids a lot of love and a lot of attention, and you're waking up with them, and you're putting them to bed, and you're feeding them, and you're hanging out with them, and you're doing fun things. But if your goal is just to be liked and to be their best buddy, you're going to do a lot more that you don't need to do. That's going to end up hurting them in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. I was very lucky. My parents feel like they had a beautiful balance of I think what did you call it? The force field. I really like how
Yeah,
you said that, the force field, because I thought of Star Wars when you said it. But
yeah. So that's usually my
the
go-to thought process of boundaries. I end up saying force field because some things can go through depending if you have the right code, and some things can't. Right?
yeah, well, my parents were great. Like they were. My dad was an entrepreneur, and he was always like he worked very hard. But as you said earlier in the show, is he showed up, and he showed up when when it mattered, and it wasn't always big things. He was just always there. My mom
And
was
by the
great
way,
though.
that's the fact that you remember that. That's what you remember. You don't remember
Mm,
all the gifts he bought you. You don't remember all the presents. You don't remember all the money that they might have
totally,
used and spent on you. But what you remember is that he was there at
totally.
events, at birthday parties, at things, at opportunities. He was there. And, I remember, and I'll say just a positive thing about my parents, good or bad or ugly of what they did or didn't do. That's not for here. That's for my own therapy. Um, is that I played hockey in high school. Let me rephrase. I sat on the bench in high school. I rarely played on my hockey team. My parents were at every game because I could have played. And if I would have played and they wouldn't have been there, one of the parents were always there. If I played and one of them weren't there, it would have crushed me and they would have been upset that they didn't see it
Mm,
because they were proud of me and they loved me. Now, in today's day and age, it's very hard to show up when you have so many responsibilities and it's so hard to make a living and you're working your butts off and you're trying to be there. Show up when and how you can. And if you can't, just let your kids know. Or if you have a best friend who is close to you who can show up, the village that you have to show up, a grandparent, a sibling, an aunt or an uncle to show up, someone should be there. It doesn't have to be you, but someone has to be there and express to your kids who's going to be there and why you can't. And it will be sad and it will be frustrating for you as a parent and for your kids. But sometimes other things sometimes are a priority, right? If I have a work
mm.
trip and I can't be at something, but I'm making money so that my kids have certain things, but I'm going to be at the thing next week. That's something you talk to your kids about. Be honest and real. I have to be away this weekend, but next weekend, I can't wait to be at your soccer game and see you, kill it. I'm so proud of you. And hopefully mommy can FaceTime me in, right? It's just about that vulnerability and honesty with your kids versus just
Yeah.
not showing up and not saying anything.
No, I agree. It's interesting because my dad, he's 74 now, but it's obviously a different generation than it is today, and mental health is very different now than it was then. But he always, yeah, even till this day, it's funny. My brother and him, we all get along really well, but my brother and I are different in how we perceive emotions and how we react to emotions. And but my dad's also not the type of guy you're going to sit there and have a very emotional conversation with. He's just
Mm-hmm.
not him. But the way that he shows up is just by being there. So like prime example, when I broke up with a serious girlfriend years ago, he wasn't going to talk to me about it, but the next day he bought a ticket to come see me. And so it's one of those things as well where my brother wants him to have the chat. I'm like, Craig, I was like, Dad's just going to be there physically, and he'll be there to to keep you entertained and to talk to you, but he's not going to like have a super in-depth emotional chat. And so I
Yeah.
think it's also being understanding to your parents is like they might show
Mm-hmm.
up and also maybe not the exact way you want, but are they
Mm-hmm.
showing up? Because there's many ways to show up as a parent.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that I listened to something a while back on Jesse Itzler said
Okay.
something, the idea that like if something happens to your best friend, like someone dies in their family, you could make
Mm,
a phone call, you could send flowers, But imagine if you showed up. You didn't say anything. You're not looking for fanfare. You're not asking questions. You just showed up. Like, that has impact when someone sees you show up for them in a low point of their life and you're just there physically. I'm not saying phone calls and other things are bad. Please do that. Don't do nothing. But someone just getting on a plane, of course, financially you have to take that into account, or driving, showing up is one of the best things you can do. Just be there.
I lost my mom when I was 25, and I can definitely tell you, it was interesting. People that I thought were going to kind of be there to support and show up didn't. The ones who maybe the ones I didn't expect, drove or whatever it is, and were there to kind of just be there to hang out, are the ones that I'm still really close with today. Because it's easy to be a friend when everything's good and you're at the bar having drinks, but when things starts to go shitty, you want to make sure you have the friends that you can count on.
For sure.
And so I have one more question separate of the father discussion. It's one thing I always like to ask people for professionals, because I think there's a lot of people that would listen to this and go, not everyone's ready to go to therapy. Sometimes it can be scary to go to therapy. Is there any advice you give to someone on, maybe how they could start their journey to kind of weave their way into it? So, because maybe not everyone's ready to take that leap yet.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say in the last 8 months to a year, I've gotten a lot of phone calls from men, specifically in like from 28 to like 45 age range. And the first, like, this is my first time in therapy. I don't know what I'm really doing here, but something feels off and I need to talk to someone about it. Right? Here's the reality of therapy. I'll just give you a breakdown of reality. The metaphor I have for therapy is that it's like a closet. Okay? Your brain is like a closet filled with old things that don't fit you, new things that you're not sure if you want to wear, a mess, all these things that you've been piling up for years. A therapist is there for the most part to, one, help you open that closet to begin with. Number two is going in the closet and organizing, throwing things out, see if things still fit, maybe burning a few things, and maybe getting some shelves to put them in the right place. No one is here to manipulate you. No one is here to hurt you. And no one is there to like change your brain that you're a different person. It's just hard to open that door sometimes and look into your brain and see what's actually there. And if you're willing to just try, you don't have to commit to 6 months. You can just see someone once or twice. But it's definitely worth trying once or twice. The second thing I'll say is go to Psychology Today. Look online. Google therapists in my area. Psychology Today is a great referral source where you can search by gender, you can search by specialty, you can search by insurance, you can filter in so many different ways and just shoot an email. You are interviewing these therapists just as much as they're interviewing you. So ask questions. What is your thought process? How do you deal with people who've never been to therapy before? Ask the hard questions. And if it doesn't jive with you and doesn't feel right, you are not committed to them. Just say, no, thank you. But if you find that person that you connect with that fully gets you, or you feel just comfortable with, that is the start of a healthy relationship in therapy. It's just, I am comfortable with you. That's all it is. Nothing has to be life-changing yet. And it might not even be life-changing to begin with or end with. It could just be someone you're comfortable with that you feel safe. Just try it. If it doesn't work, you know you tried. That's it. That doesn't have to be too hard. It might get hard at some points when the therapist has hard questions. But again, no one's trying to manipulate your brain and puppeteer you. And if that's how you feel, get out of that therapy. Just say, I'm not coming back. Thank you so much for all your help. Goodbye. You're in control more than the therapist is.
Well, I think I will end on that, because that was a really, really great response. And I think some really good nuggets there for people to take. So I really enjoy you, really appreciate you joining today. And it was a really great chat about fatherhood and family dynamics. I have a lot of friends who I think would get a lot of value out of this. And hopefully one day if I have a kid, I can revisit this podcast. So it'll help me in my experience.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate all you're doing. I think conversations for men by men is something that is super needed in today's world and is not happening enough. So if I can, I'll say this publicly so it's recorded, if I can support and help in any way, just ask.
Well, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, man.